So it's over to you, Amber. So about 20 minutes, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you. Hello everybody. As Joy's just mentioned, I am the drone coordinator for the force. I've been doing it for the last couple of years, but obviously it is a massively evolving capability. So I'll be delivering this presentation just to give a bit of insight of what we've got, and the capabilities and how we're looking to progress it in the future. So I'm just going to share my screen with yourselves. If you bear with me 1 second, and I'll just get the presentation up in the background. So if you can just let me know when this has come through, if that's okay, please.
Nothing yet, Amber.
Sorry, I have been having IT issues all this morning, so bear with us 1 second. You got that now?
Good. It's coming. Yeah. There we are. Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. So I'll just pop this onto there as well. There we go. So can you still see the presentation? Okay. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you. So
To put it on larger, Amber, just so we've just got you can see your slides down the left hand side. If you want to put it on to press, that's it. Got it.
Sorry, it's just having a bit of a right, that's fine. So I'll just pop my camera up because I think it might be interfering with it, to be honest, if that's okay with everyone. So this is basically just an overview initially, just to give people a bit of an insight on what a drone is. Just to firstly ask, does anybody know what the specific definition is for a drone? No. So, oh, sorry, it's still not working. Is that okay for you? It's full screen now.
I can see that.
Yeah, sorry about that. So a drone is basically a pilotless vehicle. It's the specific terminology whereby the pilot obviously is not on board that aircraft or vehicle, and it is basically remotely piloted. So that can be through pre-programmed flight instructions or like autonomously or individually by the actual pilot standing on the ground. There are many terms which we can refer to drones as. So the most common one is probably a drone or a UAV, or there are quite a lot of other ones, which to name a few would be RPAS, quadcopters, and UAS. UAS stands for Unmanned Aircraft System, and this is the specific terminology that is required when we're referring to it in terms of laws. So moving on, it's just to touch on briefly the Civil Aviation Authority. Has anybody heard of the Civil Aviation Authority before? So basically, the CAA is the regulatory, we're regulated externally by the Civil Aviation Authority. They basically provide laws and regulations whereby anybody who's in control of aircrafts must there's laws and regulations that are set by the Civil Aviation Authority. We have to go through the Civil Aviation Authority to obtain authorizations, which basically permits us to being able to fly. And they're ultimately responsible for the full safe integration of UAS within the UK's airspace and the total aviation system. So as part of that, as an organisation, we have to work under something which is called an operations authorization. We submit something called an operations manual, which sets out like lists of pilots, lists of equipment, processes and procedures of how we're going to kind of operate, for example, nighttime, daytime, kind of the support and paperwork, and that'll ultimately go to the CAA. They'll review it, and then they'll provide us with an operations authorization to approve of what we say we're going to do and how we're going to do it. We also operate under something specifically called a pre-DRA or 1, which is something a predefined risk assessment. And there is a lot of regulations which kind of can obviously help us work safely, but sometimes do limit us. But it's ultimately all around safety. So moving on, which is this bit that you're probably the most interested in, is around the capabilities of what we have at the moment in Durham. So at the moment we do have 5 aircrafts in total. We've got 4 aircrafts which are referred to as an M30T. That is the model of it. These aircrafts are waterproof, and they basically have multiple capabilities within the one aircraft. So they have 200 times zoom capability. They have thermal capability, a wide camera, and other kind of smart features on there, such as like tracking software, and also like something called a laser rangefinder, which basically helps us determine how far away something is from us. And then we also have one aircraft, which is called a Mavic 2 Enterprise Advanced, which is a smaller aircraft. It's a little bit quieter, so obviously we can kind of use it for different reasons, and it can sometimes come in handy. But it still has really good thermal capability and assume capability, but just not as good as the other ones. The only kind of downfall to that one is that it's just not waterproof, hence why we've got more of the bigger ones. There's different wind resistances, but ultimately we can operate in wind resistance that's more than 26 miles per hour. But we also do have other things such as speaker spotlight attachments, which can assist us in different types of incidents. So we've got speakers which can be used for public order. We've got spotlights where we've used them for maybe when we've had a MISPA to kind of assist in the search. We've used it for kind of public safety in terms of if we've needed to help somebody find a way out of a woodland, or try and find the way from like a beach and get up off the beach safely. There's obviously multiple uses, but that's just to name a few. So our capabilities in terms of pilots, basically we've got 12 pilots at present, 10 of which are operational, and at the moment our pilots are based out of Spennymoor Station, Stanley, Durham, so there's Sherburn office in Durham, and then Darlington as well. We have just recently tried to complete a course in August. However, due to the rain, it was postponed. So there's theoretical part of a course, and then there's also the practical element. The practical element wasn't able to go ahead, but they have to pass kind of an assessment in both to be able to obtain the qualification and ultimately be operational. So we've rearranged that, and hopefully we'll get a few more pilots operational in October, weather permitting, which will expand our capabilities to Barnard Castle, Stanhope and Crook. We also have another course as well, which has just been arranged, or is in the process of being arranged, should I say, for October as well, whereby we'll hope to get another 6 to 8 on top of that, which will increase us to over 20 pilots. So as part of operating drones, as I've mentioned, there's a lot of kind of regulations, and there's a lot of kind of requirements from the CAA in terms of like operators, us as an organisation being the operator, but ultimately the remote pilots as well. So the main thing that we need to consider, which is a really important thing to point out, that people potentially might not know, is there's minimum flying requirements, similar to what there are for pilots who operate manned aircraft. Basically, there's a minimum of 2 hours required every rolling 90-day period for every single pilot, and that's set by the CAA, and it's kind of non-negotiable. Obviously, there's other things within our force that we set as procedures to try and make it a little bit more safe, but as a very minimum, we do have to complete 2 hours of flying every rolling 90 days. You can potentially imagine that it is sometimes fairly difficult, just purely because of annual leave and the way that shifts work for officers. It is sometimes fairly difficult to try and maintain this, but more recently we're trying to just maintain it by operational use rather than training. It's a nice mixture. So we're just gonna touch on drone funding. So we have had a few areas where we've been provided kind of money from area action partnerships over the last couple of years, and we've also had a really generous amount from the Home Office to try and assist the development of our drone capabilities in force, which has ultimately allowed us to buy kind of the best kit that there is currently on the market, and obviously increase our capabilities. So there's a lot of costs involved, rather than just obviously pilots qualifications and training, and obviously the initial kit. There's ongoing CPD requirements. There's other equipment such as like safety equipment, landing mats, things like that. So there's a lot of other things to kind of take into account when purchasing drones. There's a lot of regular maintenance required that potentially people aren't aware of. But yeah, as standard within Durham, we do have to have a minimum of 2 CPD days per year as well. So that's obviously a variation of different things that we'll try and cover, but it's going to ultimately try and make the pilots a little bit more experienced, and we will try and more and more we're trying to do a little bit more of situational training, so that it's kind of going to be things on like scenarios that they're potentially going to come across. But as you can imagine, like obviously the drones are an ever evolving asset. So there's potentially going to be new things coming out in the future. And we've got to try and keep up with that and try and have the best capabilities we can. So in terms of drone deployments, I'd love to be able to say that it's obviously we'll get out and put the drone up in all scenarios, but there are quite a lot of constraints that sometimes do limit us, unfortunately. So some of the legislation to touch on, we're basically not allowed to fly drones within 50 metres of any uninvolved person. On takeoff and landing, that is reduced to 30 metres. However, once we are airborne, that does increase to 50 metres, and it basically acts as a bit of a bubble of an airspace to protect them. Our battery life on the aircraft, obviously depending which aircraft we use, the bigger aircrafts can fly for slightly longer. On the specification, it does say 41 minutes, but realistically, I think the most I've had out of one is potentially 32 minutes. And it does depend on multiple different factors. For example, the weather, how much they're getting flown, if they're just sat static in the air, different factors like that. And then more recently, there's been quite a few developments in terms of NPCC, so that's National Police Chiefs Council guidance. So the National Police Chiefs Council has developed a drone programme whereby it's focusing on the development of obviously drone capabilities nationally, because each individual force we're kind of doing it at their own pace and learning as we go. Whereas we're trying to merge that and kind of all learn together and develop like a standard capability across the UK. So that's kind of an overview of the NPCC work as well. But some of the things that are coming out of that are something such as minimum crew requirements. So that's recently been introduced whereby we have to operate as a minimum of 2 people. Ideally 2 remote pilots where we can who are qualified and kind of fully operational. However, there are like kind of exceptions to it whereby we can brief somebody, obviously if we haven't got very many people on duty or other things like that. So another constraint is wind and rain restrictions. So obviously I've mentioned that the maximum wind resistance we can fly our drones in is 26 mile an hour. Anything beyond that, then we simply just can't fly. And then in terms of the rain, obviously the M30s can fly it in most rain, but the Mavics are just non-deployable as they're completely not water resistant. So we're not going to risk that. In terms of VLOS, basically that stands for visual line of sight. So we also operate under something which means visual line of sight operations, whereby we have to maintain unaided visual line of sight of that aircraft at all moments within that flight. So from the moment that takes off from the ground to the moment that then lands, we have to be able to keep an eye on that. And basically it's to just assess kind of what's happening in the airspace around it and to make sure that it's safe and it's not going to collide with anything or nothing's going to collide with the drone itself. And that's hence why we need potentially the 2 remote pilots or 2 people, because one will act as an observer while the pilot's focusing on the remote controller or whatever the task is that it involves. We also, within the visual line of sight world, we're not allowed to fly beyond 500 meters. So it's kind of whatever comes first. So standard for operating, we're obviously there's a maximum altitudes that we can fly up to, and there's maximum distances that we can fly out to. So the maximum altitude is up to 120 meters, which is 400 feet, and that's simply so that there's like the safe integration between manned and unmanned aviation. So there's a bit of a buffer in between at the minute anyway. And then the visual line of sight aspect as well, I suppose. If we we're allowed to fly up to 500 meters away, but if we lose visual line of sight before that, then obviously that is the maximum we would be able to fly to. So it kind of depends on whether capabilities on the day as to how much it will restrict or kind of allow us to fly to. And then in addition to this, we also have different capabilities in terms of our pilots. So it's not a standard that everyone will be able to fly during the day and during the night. It is a completely different skill. So we obviously provide training and we kind of put them through an assessment to make sure they're capable to fly on a night, and then we will give them that capability. And then one last thing is that we don't have a full 24-hour capability at the moment, purely because we've got a complete spread of our pilots. So I know I've mentioned that the pilots are based at different stations, but they're also based out of different departments at the moment. So we've got people based out of our roads and armed policing units who deploy the drones, which is generally more in a spontaneous deployment. And then we also have pilots on our neighbourhood teams, so they can do a mixture of the spontaneous jobs and the pre-planned jobs. But potentially one of the constraints that we do have within the force is that we just don't have dedicated people, and therefore there may be occasions when there isn't a pilot available. This could be due to other demands within the force or just kind of staffing requirements. So far in 2024, this was just from a couple of weeks ago, to be fair, so there may be more since we submitted this presentation. We've had 153 deployments, 13 of which have been firearms related, 26 have been to deal with missing from homes, 13 have been for pre-planned operations, and 58 have been for suspect searches. There has been like a couple of other ones, obviously not to mention on there, just other types of jobs that we will go to. But this is just to give a bit of an overview in terms of the type of jobs that we are deploying to. We do also offer live stream. So in terms of firearms jobs and larger operations, the live stream is used more and more, whereby we can directly live stream and copy what we can see on the drone controller from the cameras on the drone into our command room, which allows the commanders in charge of operations such as silvers and golds to ultimately see that real-time intelligence and kind of assess situations for what they can see rather than maybe what's passed over the radio, which we obviously have really good feedback from commanders on, and they say that it's really useful. And in my opinion, it's invaluable because they can just see exactly what's happening there and then. So in the next 12 months, there's a couple of things obviously that we are looking at. As I've mentioned, we've got the 3 more areas that are going to have the capability, which are Stanhope, Barnard Castle and Crook. We have already purchased the 3 aircraft that are going to go to them locations, and then potentially we are going to be buying more through other funding. We potentially might even expand our capabilities. And by that, I mean basically potentially looking at different types of aircraft so that we can expand what we can do. At the moment, we don't have an indoor drone capability, but that is potentially an option that we might look into. And obviously, as I've mentioned, it's an evolving world where new drones might be released and they might have better capabilities which are more suited to our needs, and might be able to assist us a little bit more. So we're potentially looking at that. As I mentioned again, we are looking at increasing our number of pilots, and we've got another course that's getting booked for October. And in terms of nationally, I've briefly mentioned about the NPCC drone portfolio. And as I mentioned, ultimately their vision is to enable local forces and partners to deliver a safe, efficient and effective drone capability that does meet the air support needs of policing to ultimately keep the public safe. And as part of that, there will be guidance and safety notices published, and they are also in the process of developing something called an APP, which is an authorised professional practice, which is obviously professionalising drone capabilities nationally in setting standards and introducing new procedures. So yeah, and that is everything. So has anybody got any questions?
I think that's really helpful, Amber. I think I'm opening it up for questions before I come in. Sweetie, keep an eye on hands just in case I miss any.
Okay.
Yeah. I think the one we saw, Amber, was a great presentation on, I think it was Neighbourhoods Week, and we saw the impact it has on off-road bikes, which I think all members here are very exercised about. But we also saw how it was able to identify drugs, you know, sort of cannabis farms and the heat within the detector. And also the, like, as you mentioned, the vulnerability side of finding people who are vulnerable quickly. And it's something that I think you're right in the middle of it, is because I think that strategically, what I've said as a PCC, I'd like to get a drone for every neighbourhood team, and then to have a number of people on every team trained up, which, as you've just said, it's not as easy. But because of the, particularly on the off-road bike side, there's certain areas, certain places that's got off-road bikes at certain times of certain days. So you wouldn't think that the time requirement over 90 days, you wouldn't think that would be too onerous, given when we focus that priority as in our police and crime plan. But obviously, I think it does take time to get the kit, get the training, keep resilience up, and get the information out there. And I've also seen it being used with ones with our like road traffic as well, which I think is a really good opportunity when you're out on the roads, again, like you said, to get that visibility of actually what's happening, and training people up. So you know, it's very, very challenging, isn't it, keeping up with all the tech and all the where you can and where you can't fly, when you can, when you can't fly.
Yeah.
Is there a thing about, because we were talking about getting a landowner's permission to fly, is that the case, or can you fly from anywhere? I'm just thinking, particularly in our rural areas, a drone's quite useful, but do you have to get permission first, or can you get a carte blanche, you know, can you get permissions beforehand so it's already agreed?
Yeah, so we have obviously got people who have offered us to use the land previously. So I know Andy Cusick, who's a PCSO from Rural Watch, he obviously knows quite a few of the farmers. So we were able to basically get permission beforehand, and then happy if they're happy to, then we'll obviously can go on their land. Generally, we will always try and get permission beforehand, where we can.
I'm just thinking of like housing providers, things like that. If there was any way of helping you get that sort of already in the bag, we've got an agreement that we can use their land if we need to. But anything, you know, obviously we've got councillors here from Darlington. If you do find any sticky areas or any obstacles, really come to us, because it's something that we really want to work with you and partners to make this work as well as it can do. The one we saw obviously was the off-road bikes, and it was quite successful. Identifying who it is and getting that visual side in. When they've got the balaclavas on, you can still see what they're wearing and the bikes and everything. So anybody else want to ask Amber any questions before we move on? Gerald, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks very much, Joy. Well, I think like everyone else, I think we're very impressed with the drone system. I think we've all seen and witnessed and heard of how successful it's been, both in urban and rural areas. And if you mentioned one of the big problems in rural areas, the quad bikes, which just come out of nowhere and thunder across the field and create so much damage and then run back home. So hopefully, I mean, obviously I know Andy very well, and I do know he's been successful with the drones in Darlington area. So we look forward to more to that. But just a simple question, really. Will the drones follow the suspects into another area? In other words, would they go to the North Yorkshire, or do they need permission from the North Yorkshire Police to be able to step over the border with the drones? Because I mean, there may be an issue there of land ownership, of course, going back to what Amber was saying.
Yeah, so we've only had a few deployments outside of our force area. I suppose it depends on the type of incident. If it starts in our area and then evolves into the other It just depends where we are. We'll always try and get permission off the person of whoever's land it is. But there shouldn't be any real restrictions in terms of if we were dealing with an incident and it was in Durham's area and we needed to go in their area. We have to do a lot of paperwork and kind of dynamic risk assessing. So we will just do something that is based on that scenario and that situation, with like considering the weather and the location at that time and what permissions we might need. We just have to risk assess it there and then. So I can't foresee any issues unless it was potentially like near an airport where we would need to get specific permissions from air traffic control, or if it was near military areas and different things like that, that might also inhibit us from being able to continue that. So hopefully that answers the question. But we have done mutual like deployments in other force areas such as Northumbria before, and assist them because they maybe don't have that drone capability at that time. So we do work in partnership with other forces as well. Yeah.
Sorry, but just for clarification, there isn't any delay if it goes across from Darlington to North Yorkshire. There isn't a delay while you're getting the paperwork sorted out to get permission to zoom across, in which case, of course, the little devils could be far away before you get there with the snow.
Yeah, I suppose it depends on the scenario, but there's always something that we have to do. So we have a pre-planned process for our deployments, and then we'll have a spontaneous deployment process. So we have to do the spontaneous checklist before we can deploy either way. So it ultimately depends on kind of what it is that we encounter as to how long it will take. But generally speaking, the spontaneous checklist is basically an 11-point checklist, which is as part of the checklist in the pack. We'll record it on our body-worn video, and that'll literally take maybe 1 or 2 minutes. And obviously, if there is, we've deployed like obviously in areas where we need to get air traffic clearance, then unfortunately, if there's a delay with things like that, then it can't be helped because we can't deploy until we have approval. So yeah, does that answer the question?
The local PC has the authority to make that spontaneous decision, to go through the 11-question checklist and then go.
So the pilot, so the pilot who gets deployed to an incident, they'll be going to a spontaneous job. So then it becomes, because it's short notice and it's time critical, then it'll fall under the spontaneous category. If it was a pre-planned job where we've got time to plan it, then that's how we would categorize it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Brilliant. No, and we've got a question in the chat. Councillor Holroyd, do you want to ask it, or do you want me to do it? If it's
I just wanted to ask about the criteria for drone deployment. There are just a couple of examples in our ward about, you know, what would trigger it. We had a few incidents with some kids kind of hiding behind cars and throwing things at cars that went by. And we've had some weird ones overnight where people have been cutting off bits of tree and shrub from a certain area of the town. And whether, you know, things like drone might help to just get that distance and have somebody there spotting who the problem causers are, if you like, or whether that would just be too low level to trigger drone use.
So I think it's important to mention that the beauty with having drones is we can deploy them to high level, high risk incidents, but we can also deploy them at lower level type incidents, obviously depending on what capabilities we've got at that moment in time with staffing, the weather and things like that. So I definitely wouldn't rule things out, but it's also dependent on other things. So a good point to mention is the fact that potentially if we're getting asked to go to an incident and for example, are missing from home, but they've been missing for 4 hours and we don't really have an area to search or anywhere specific, then for us it's quite hard to determine, well, actually, where do we start our search off from? Because we only have a set amount of battery time, and obviously there's only a certain amount of searching we can do, and how far do we go? So I think it's quite important we basically need specific search areas for certain things. So if there's not a specific search area identified, then potentially it will be declined based on that. But then obviously other types of incidents, I think it just depends. If there's something still ongoing, then yes, potentially. But it does also depend on other demand within the force at that moment in time.
Thanks.
Of course, thank you.
Thanks, Alva. That's really helpful. And as it progresses and we get different versions, I think that would be really helpful. to keep members informed and cited on the developments. And I think really important for me, Amber, is sometimes when you invest in things, it's getting those good news stories coming back to us. So, because again, we share that at the police and crime panel. So it might be something Sweetie can pick up going forward, because I'm sure the link to the off-road bikes is particularly an interest in, of the public and members. So any results that we have from investment in cameras linking to that, just basically what you've shared there was helpful, because there's a story behind every one of those results, isn't there?
Yeah.
But please share good news stories, because I'm sure Sweetie will capture it, and it's getting it out there in the public domain as well, around where the money's being invested, and also more eyes and ears. And I think what you're saying, I think to Councillor Holroyd, it's basically intelligence led. So if we get the intelligence for the local community that something's happening and where it is in the locations, that might be really helpful. As and when we get more and more kit, obviously gets better. When we've got more pilots, more drones. But as we've got it, I imagine, like I say, depending on weather permitting and all the other conditions, it does restrict it. But I think getting them in the localities will be really something that we can strive for as well, to give more options up in the air and in our communities.
Yeah.
Would you be okay for the slides to be shared, Amber, with obviously just for members who aren't here, but also for members who are here who want to use the really helpful presentation that you've give us?
Yeah, that's fine.
That's lovely. I can't see any more hands up, so thank you very much, Amber, for your time.
No
really
problem.
appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you. Also,
Bye.
sorry, just to touch, I do have a couple of good examples, which I can mention now if you'd like. So just to give one in particular, specifically for the Darlington area as well, we use the drone basically to track off-road bikes, just because obviously I know that's a big area that we're trying to tackle. Basically, we've done it multiple times, but just to give one example, which really highlights the benefits of having the drone. And basically, they were kind of using them in an antisocial manner within like a housing area where potentially children were out playing, people were evidently walking the dogs. And ultimately, we used the drone to monitor the situation, gather that evidence, and also identified the locations where they went back to. And that ultimately led us to being able to seize them bikes, which is obviously a really good result. We've had quite a few good results, specifically for Darlington's area, because we've got a pilot base there. And we do run quite a lot of Operation Endurance, which is obviously targeted at off-road bikes and antisocial behaviour.
And I'm just thinking on that one as well, Amber, I know that Darlington, through their tenancy agreement, they're not allowed to keep bikes on their property. So again, when you're flying it, identify, and I know the pilots will be looking out for bikes on property, even if they're not being ridden. It is against the tenancy agreement to have the bikes on the property. So that's really helpful. And I've used Darlington's example for other housing providers in Durham to say, if you've got that clause, it does help us and gives us another tool, another opportunity to go via tenancy as well. Just before you go, Amber, I've got Councillor Beckett. If you want to be quickly come in, Councillor Beckett, before we move on.
Yeah, it was just a question about the line of sight. So like you said, they've got the either night vision or thermal cameras. So I'm guessing that's been being deployed when it's dark. So how does that work when you don't really have sight? Because they'll be lost in the night sky.
The drones will be lost in the night sky.
Yeah.
So the drones themselves have something called they're called like indicator lights, so navigation lights on the aircraft. So they have them on the different arms of the aircraft. And we also have like either the speaker spotlight attachment that we can potentially use to identify it, or there's a beacon on top of the aircraft as well, which is just a white flashing light. So there's basically lighting on the aircraft that allows us to maintain it, and it allows us to understand kind of what directions it's facing, because the lights are different colours. So we basically use the navigation lights for that, and then we're assisted by the use of the cameras to be able to work out where it's facing and what we're looking at.
Okay, yeah, that's helpful. And another thing, I was just sort of thinking that there'd be an extension of both the helicopters and the cars, somewhere in between them. They can't go, obviously, as high as the helicopters or out for as long. But but would go places that the cars
The
can't.
helicopter can't. Yeah, definitely. And we've had a few good examples where we use it for pursuits, where obviously we can't necessarily use the drone while the pursuit is ongoing, where you can potentially use MPAS and the cars for that. However, once the pursuit has come to an end and we're at the location where potentially the people have decamped, then we will use the drone at that point and then like identify maybe thermal heat sources where they're hiding in the field. We've got really good evidence of that. I did try and include bits of footage as well, so it was a little bit more visual, but unfortunately I wasn't allowed for other reasons. So but I did mention to the other people that I can obviously come out, and if you want me to attend a meeting and show some footage, then I'm more than happy to do that as well, just to give you a bit of an idea of what the capabilities actually look like.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
that's great. That's great. Thank you.
That's
No
really
problem.
helpful, especially
Can I just throw it? Can I
Yeah.
just throw a question in? Amber, is it possible to provide the councillors with legislation about drones used privately, both used privately in the area? And occasionally this subject comes up, and I probably, like a lot of people, are not really too sure what is legit and what isn't.
Yeah, it's quite difficult and complex, the legislation, but there is some new regulation that was introduced in 2021. So yeah, if you like, I can look into that and I can try and I'll get back to the PCC office in relation to that.
Thank you.
brilliant.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time, Amber, and for the offer of helping members and doing some local presentations as well. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Thanks. Bye.
Okay, everyone. I'm just going to move very, very quickly on. There was quite an update to go through, but I appreciate we haven't got as much time as we normally do. So hopefully you're aware we currently consulting on the police and crime plan. I'm sure you'll have been contacted by our engagement team, which is fantastic, who's Dawn and Tia, come under Sweetie's team as well, to do lots of engagement where myself, the team, is trying to find as many people that we can talk to get their views on what the priorities are across County Durham and Darlington for police and crime. So that's sort of ongoing, and if we are going into the area, they will be in touch, especially if it comes into your ward. There's opportunities where they possibly can. Sometimes it might just be an impromptu drop in, but where there's a planned drop in, I have asked the team to let local members know, so we can link in with you all as well if you want us to come and speak to us whilst we at the area as well. So that's going really well. We've got a survey as well online going. Hopefully you've got the details of that to share. Really appreciate if you could share it on your local social media, because people are more likely to respond to your requests at a local level than across the force area. So at the moment, I think the priorities are still coming up very, very strong. Antisocial behaviour, drug use, drug dealing, off-road bikes, speeding, and making it obviously more convenient to ring in, which there's been some significant improvements in that area over recent times as well. So we're going to use that sort of the survey, and that will be as well as the online. We are doing obviously the groups. We're going to different events, done a lot of country shows recently, and we are going to the Darlington Farmers Auction Mart on a regular basis, so we can really touch base with our farming and rural communities to make sure that we are feeding in and getting their views as well. A key area for me on the plan would be really focusing our priorities on alcohol and drug related crime and ASB. Alcohol alone costs the North East about 1.5 billion a year, and half of all homicides and half of all acquisitive crimes nationally are drug related, while a third of serious violence offences are alcohol related. So really it's important that we get where we can to adopt a prevention first approach, the focus on the root cause of offending, in this case drug and alcohol. So we're doing as much as we can, so hopefully you'll have seen that, you'll have taken part, and really appreciate you sharing that as well. We've also recently produced that we took a draft annual report to the police and crime panel recently, and we're just sort of formalising and finalising the plan as we talk, and it obviously covers although it's the end of the year, it's really highlights what we've achieved in the first 3 years of my appointment. Some really positive things to include. We've now got the highest number of officers on our streets for more than a decade. However, as you hear from me on a regular basis, we're still 128 officers short of 2010 levels, and another 14 forces like Durham are in the same position where we haven't got back up to 2010 levels. And I obviously I've now got the finance.
Joy, you've gone on mute.
Okay, sorry. So hopefully, we're obviously working with our jointly on the finance portfolio. So we are making a case right to the Home Office about fair funding, but specifically we can make the case for Durham and Darlington. ASB fell during the year by 11.5%, and really very much about some of the work that we've had around hotspot policing. We've got the Home Office or the Minister of Justice in Darlington at the moment, looking at the immediate justice work. We've got 2 million for antisocial behaviour and 2 million for immediate justice. So I think some of those programmes are really delivering results. Sometimes, we've got a lot of work that's gone on about how to report antisocial behaviour, which organisation it is, how do you call for a case review. If you're not happy, how do you appeal? And those, working across with partner agencies is getting that out to members of the public as well. A key part of my obviously my delivery for the police and crime plan was the investment in reducing waiting times for 999 calls and 101 calls and abandoned calls. We have invested, the force has invested with support from ourselves and the funding side to roll out new digital contact methods. So we can now do it online without talking to anybody at all. You can report crime and antisocial behaviour. You can have chat online, which is 24/7, or you can do the traditional methods as well. And we've invested in something that will give a better victims experience going forward, which I think in a forthcoming meeting I'll take you more through all those different options, because I think as local members you'll be very, very interested in that. We've invested 205,000 from Safer Streets in Rural Eye scheme, which brought together rural watch coordinators and also to provide some kit to help target offenders working in the rural communities. We also doing a lot of work around, as well as the finance, the addictions and substance misuse. We've been doing a lot of work around the nitrous oxide and links to killed and seriously injured on the roads, as well as the introduction and the proliferation of synthetic drugs and how dangerous they can be in our community, and really advocating for naloxone rollout across County Durham and Darlington as well. We've looked at understanding the links to drugs and alcohol of offending. So we are looking at doing more drug testing on arrest, and there has been a link, a clear link. This is done nationally to those arrested for domestic abuse and cocaine. We've looked at a key part of my role is looking at the prevention side, and I'm really pleased to say that with the help of Durham Agents Against Crime and the apprentices who work for them, young apprentices, We've been able to roll out the Commissioner's Challenge, which is bronze, silver, gold, which takes them through how to keep themselves safe, most importantly, how to keep their houses safe, how to keep the cars safe. And as well as learning the messages themselves, what we hope is to take that message home to the parents and grandparents and spread the word. So I'll stop there if anybody wants to ask any questions on that update to that point. Just I've got some messages in here. Right, it's Councillor Holroyd who's looking at the recovery. We've got that's really important, and as we go on forward around the centralised custody facilities, I think we're going to get better at the referral mechanisms. We have got through Dame Carol Black's funding more money for treatment and recovery services. So there's a lot more that we can do as well, but I think it's important that through the that arrest referral side that they get the opportunity to get signposted into the recovery services as well. And there's a lot more we can do along those. And I think Sweetie's put the details of that underneath. But I think it's going to get more comprehensive. We'll get more data linked to the crime and alcohol and drugs, which we can share with members as well, because I think if we focus on them, it could impact upon serious crime, knife crime, you know, our drug dealing, all those things. So on a flip side of that, one of my key things is to do more testing on the roads for people who are drug driving, because if we increase the risk of being detected, you hopefully reduce the demand of anybody taking cocaine or cannabis as an option, because it stays in your system longer. And you know, in our area, no matter, even if we're in Darlington or in the very rural Weardale, most people need the cars to get around. So there's a big risk if they do take drugs, but that's only if we have the relevant education and enforcement available on the roads to do that. So again, that's something I'm pushing nationally. We'll move forward.
Councillor Snedker's got his hand
Oh
up.
yes, sorry, do you want to come in?
Yeah, cheers, Joy. Thank you very much. I mean, I've read your report, which you circulated, which was lovely to see. And obviously, one of the things that you talked about, completely unexpected, is early intervention and diversion tactics, etc. And no doubt we do that because it's the right thing to do, but also it's a good budget protection. If we can divert and nip behaviour in the bud, it means that communities are suffering for less time from ASB, and also we can maybe get people onto the straight and narrow, so to speak. I was at, I think quite a few people here were at an event at Central Hall about connecting our communities, and I was sat on a table that was focusing on youth services. And one thing that came out loud and clear was that the spending on youth services and youth workers has nationally been cut in half. And I think Darlington, we don't have any paid for youth workers in the borough at all. And one of the sort of facts that came out was that for every £1 spent on youth services, it brings back £6 in savings elsewhere, another diversion. And I know it's not directly into your remit, but I'm just wondering if you, I'm sure we will as members as well, but you will sort of put pressure on the need to invest in youth workers and youth clubs, because of not only it being the right thing to do, but it should hopefully protect your budget as well, Joy.
Yeah. I completely, support that. The early identification, early, work with people before the offend. And I think that's what we were saying at Darlington this morning. Why do you have to get, you don't want to offend to get the, to get into the system, to get the support. You want to get the early identification, but also have, where youth workers used to do that. We starting at a sort of, there is some great youth work, as in clubs and things out there, but I think sometimes the work that we need to do has to be out in the community. On a positive note, you know, from what I'm hearing from the civil servants and the government, there's a lot of talk about prevention, which is actually, you know, welcome. But how do you do it? And, you know, we all would like to do it, but it does require some investment. They're also talking about youth hubs, and a lot of the civil servants, again, talking to me, it's going to be across children's centres and the Home Office. So it's a bit of a collective between who owns that, you know, it's sort of a joint, different ministerial departments. But that's another progression around bringing all the services like she was start for older people into our communities. Now, what we hoping that looks different in Durham, that looks different to West Midlands to, you know, to Cumbria, because it has to be very much localized. So again, that's an opportunity that may come to Darlington in the near future, but definitely, you know, the signposting, the positive activities for young people, but it has to be affordable, it has to be accessible, and really, you know, if you've got a number of children in the household, it should be wherever possible you try to make those, that's where you'd like to have it free as well. But part of the police and crime plan will be focusing on young people and on the prevention and deterrent aspect of the work that we do. So some positive stuff. So please do, you know, I'd have you comment and have you say about opportunities that we maybe need to look at as well, because we will take them on board. Well, quickly, I think we've got 5 minutes. So we've talked about the 101. Really important that investment continues. Can I ask, has anybody reported any crime online yet? Have you tried it? Anybody seen? Because you can just go like.
I've used Operation Snap a few times, Joy.
Yeah, well, you can actually report. Obviously, they've done a soft launch. But if you go to, I think it's Durham Police, it'll take you to the front end on a computer, and you want to report crime. Is it happening now? And then it drops down the menu, and then you'll be able to do all what you would normally say to an operator on your computer as well. So I would really be interested in any feedback that you have if you come to use that. Sweetie, would you be able to send some members around just a little bit of like an overview of that, because we will be doing something in the near future just to push that out. But I think they just wanted to do it like a soft launch rather than have everybody come in at the area. But I think they're more or less ready to go now, because it seems to be going quite well. Go forward. Where are we at? I think I don't know if you saw there was some fantastic results from the roads police, and where we had a censure where they had that piece of kit where it was picking the people up who either were on a mobile phone or they had no seatbelt on. And the company actually identify all the images where the law was being broken, and they bring them to Durham Constabulary, and then Durham Constabulary had to process them. And there were some really, really dangerous drivers out there. One that sort of might have been on the picture on the national news. There was somebody on his mobile phone, and the passenger was on steering the wheel while he was on his mobile phone. There was another one, the most shocking one, and I think Durham were looking to take it quite serious, because there was a lady sitting in the front passenger seat who had a child about 18 months on her knee. With the window open, the child was holding onto the window, no seatbelt, no restraint. And if there had been an accident, that you know, both of them really, really serious. So they're looking, obviously, because they know who was in the car, looking at the like the child safety issues and to get that, so it wasn't just about a fine. There would be some education and resources about that. But one person I thought was caught 4 times in the same place, going back and forth as part of their business. And it's those people for me that are more likely, you know, they're going to cause an accident to us who are driving safely, or you know, but if they're doing that, they're not fully conscious of what they're doing on the roads. The sad thing is, this is what we're trying to do. That money that we raise goes to the government. What I'd like to do is pay more for the organisation to come, and the money goes back to us for investment in road safety in our area, because our Durham people are obviously using it to make awareness of the people who have been caught. But I think it's that whole investment of road safety, it should be coming into Durham and Darlington to do that as well. So I think Sweetie said you've going to circulate some information around there. Oh, quick, what else? Can I very quickly run through this list? Is there anything else? Hotspots, we've talked about major justice, engagement. Yeah, engagement activity. If you've got anything, finally, if you've got anything engagement wise, if you've got fetes, coffee mornings, lunch clubs, any community events that you would like my engagement team to come, drop us a line, and we will pass it on to Dawn and Tia, who will look at their availability and let you know. But it's open to everybody, and where I possibly can, I will join them. But they are really out on the roads most of the day, aren't they, Sweetie? You know, yeah. And weekends. But the engagement they're getting and the intelligence they get is fantastic, because a lot of people come up to them that maybe wouldn't go to ring it in. So they are sharing that information with the local teams as well. I mean, an example of engagement, which is a bit, I'll end on this note. We were at Eggleston Show on Saturday. And just as they were packing up, a farmer came and said, "Oh, I've got an unexploded bomb on my land. I picked it up and it's sort of sitting in the corner of the field." And Dawn said, "Well, you need to ring it in 999." And he said, "No, I've told you about it now." So it actually, we were with the cadets. So the farmer had spoke to a young cadet. The young cadet talked to Dawn. And long story short, the bomb disposal were round that night, exploding an unidentified object in a farmer's field. But it hadn't been just there for days or weeks. I think it's just, oh, while you're here, you might want to sort that out. So it is valuable, and for me, it's priceless, that the engagement side, as you know, as members, just sitting somewhere, somebody will come over to you and share that information. So we trying to get, you know, north, south, east, west, across the areas, but you should have information and what I've asked, obviously, Sweetie's got a details there on the Darlington side. Is there anything you just want to mention about Darlington, Sweetie? I'll just bring you in because I know you've provided that information.
Yeah, it was just a couple of things. So around the engagement activity. So today, as we speak, Joy's mentioned, we've got the home visit around the immediate justice pilot, which is really useful. There's been visits to, I'm just refreshing my memory, there's been visits to the college, where the engagement team have spoken to numerous young people, because we are trying to encourage young people to join our external scrutiny groups. So that's been effective as well. There's been, I think it was mentioned, I think it was Councillor Snedger mentioned, you were at the ROC or the ROC event, and I know a number of elected members were there for that. And yeah, and it was just
went to Firthmoor as well, didn't it?
That's
engagement there, and also the supermarkets. So I think that's a key area. But if we know about it and they're free, you'll find Dawn and Tia will be really happy to come along. At the moment, we are part of our presentation, we are asking people what your priorities are, but it is good to get the feedback from all corners, villages, you know, towns. We've been to luncheon clubs, you know, it doesn't matter, it doesn't have to be a big event. Sometimes the small events, you get really, really good engagement as well. So I've got Councillor Ali.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Hiya, yes, can, sorry.
Hi. Yeah, it was just to say from the Rock event, it was, I saw to you that it was a really good event to bring all the voluntary sector networks that are going on around Darlington from all age backgrounds to see all the good works everyone's doing and how each other can be a support to one another. If somebody's got something else like a space they can provide for someone having an idea of running some kind of coffee morning or a support group, these are the things that are needed now more than ever. And what I would like to emphasize is in an area like Northgate, people are still getting over the shock of what happened with the riots. And it's all good that we're moving on, carrying on, but there's still actively, you hear the public giving you their thoughts on what is happening next to prevent anything like this happening again. Are the authorities going to be seen there straight away to support us? So we need to make sure that our residents do feel safe, do feel listened to, and it's not seen as just we've made a visit and that's it, it's done, like a tick box exercise, which is something that I've been told a lot. So that engagement is so crucial, and where the borough's concerned, even through sports events, reaching out to youth, when they go back home and speak with their families, they'll see that people are actively engaged and keep bringing the community together through different events with all ages, and building that community cohesion also impacts on reporting, because we've lost the faith of people reporting, and that's what we see on the ground. And we need more presence of officers doing street walks, you know, like the good old days. And that's something that's been said a lot, and it's been amazing, all the works that people have reported back to today. So thank you for the presentation.
No, and I appreciate that. And I think one of the things, if you have met Don and Tia, they're definitely not tick box people. They are passionate. And one of the things that they picked up, you know, it did come after the disorder in Darlington, they went to talk to some of the banks along High Row, and the banks felt a little bit isolated. So Don's looking at to see, obviously there's certain, they can part of Business Watch or anything, but they're trying to see how they can link in the businesses who aren't part of Business Watch within the Business Watch area. But I know just by the work that they did with the community, they were able to do a little bit of finding out where people felt vulnerable and weren't part of it. And I think it's really important, like you said, to get that trust and confidence to report. But who do they report to? So that feedback loop's really, really important, and we'll get better at that. Hopefully, as everybody saying, we've just had our first newsletter, and again, we can have everybody seen it. That's we encouraging people to sign up to keep in the know. Obviously, members should get one anyway, but if you're part of Keep in the Know, all the community will get the electronic newsletter as well. So if you haven't got that, will you let me know if you haven't been receiving it? We've just had our first edition. Just gives you an overview of what's happened that month, but it will be a monthly newsletter going forward, just to keep you updated. There was just, well, Sweetie, I think you've answered Councillor Holroyd's question. Just slightly over there, so I think we've covered quite a lot today. But if there is anything in between now and the next one, just drop me a line. Really happy to have that engagement and dialogue going forward, and we will obviously keep you posted with how things are progressing. It is early days, especially I'm surprised, you know, like there's a lot of with funding that we've got, we don't know what's continuing. When I think as councillors, you'll be aware, you'll have a lot of pots of money that that you'll probably be waiting to say what's going to go forward. So we are, as an office, trying to see what we can do, because if people start looking for jobs elsewhere while the government's deciding what's going to continue, where the funding's going to be, that project's in jeopardy. So that's important for us to ensure we have a little bit of an option of how we go forward while we're waiting for funding announcements to be made. Okay. I can't see any hands up there, so can I thank you all very much for your time? Appreciate it, and I say do get in touch if it could be help, or particularly if you want the engagement team to pop along to do some work with yourselves as local members. It's great to have you, but also even for me, great to have them to support you in your communities as well. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, Joy.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.